we would go down there and we were walking around reading all the things, and it was in pretty much disrepair. And we were at one of those where it's like above ground and it's like a big slab, and we're all standing there. And all of a sudden I look over and there's a black snake, but they're so big, and it was like laying along the entire thing, and I hate snakes. And even though he was probably sleeping, he could have cared less. I saw him and I went screaming and running, like feet out, and oh, he scared me to death. Never went back there at all. Because apparently that was his home, and I was treading on his home. Pretty crazy.
I know, me too.
All right, guys, we will commence. I know I have 3 people absent for various reasons. I think maybe the time change got everyone else. I went to your church yesterday. It was half empty. What?
I didn't even make it to church.
See? It's the time change?
Yeah.
Felt
And then it
weird.
was raining, so I couldn't really sleep, and that just threw me off.
It felt weird getting up in the dark this morning. All right. Well, let's get started. What are some apps that save your insanity?
Like any of them you use for your classroom or meditation or whatever.
YouTube.
YouTube?
YouTube.
YouTube.
If you don't have a pin yet,
They didn't
I
give
don't
them one.
want. Oh, they don't give you pins? I don't know.
It's usually in a little box that
Yeah,
they
yeah,
get with you. They usually give you 2. I know because the art teacher still. I know. Where's my pen?
who's the art teacher?
It's the Miss Latif.
Oh, I love
I'm like, where's my pen?
her.
She has a little. She's like, it's in here. I use the boot.
Kahoot, I was gonna say.
Oh, because we would Luke it.
Yeah.
I like Luke it. Even the tubes.
Jeopardy
Yeah.
Lab.
Luke it, yeah. We give a hoot. Yeah.
Jeopardy Labs.
What's the one you're saying?
Luke it?
Luke it.
Yeah.
Somebody was doing that when I observed their class.
I could get it. All this stuff.
Did you hear that one, Steve? Luke it.
Luke it? Yeah. Like Luke, but out.
B-L-O-O.
Like book it?
Yeah, look it.
Yeah.
Wait, do you teach at
Okay,
Erica?
yeah.
No,
Who does?
no.
Right over here? So I wonder if you have some of my students.
Probably.
I use Class Screen for a timer.
I have pretty much every move. No.
Oh,
So
Well,
the majority.
YouTube for everything.
Yeah.
For timer.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm still working on it.
What's Jeff Lab?
Jeopardy Labs.
What is it?
Jeopardy.
Labs.
I couldn't scratch
Oh.
up, so I just said Jeopardy.
Thank
Does
you.
that have the actual game of Jeopardy in it?
Right.
The actual game of Jeopardy in it?
Yeah, so
Oh.
you can create your own version too to like modify it to your classroom, and you can add as many categories and add the questions.
Anybody use Pear Deck? Yeah. I've been trying to. Yeah, I've been trying to.
During COVID, I did.
I think
Yeah, I
so.
was doing COVID.
Not so much now.
Not so much?
No.
Why the difference?
I think it was just easier to send it to the kids on their deck and
And
then
if you get instant, as well, you
Yeah.
can actually see certain things like Kahoot, you can actually play a game as your, as whole class.
How long does it take to make a Pear Deck presentation?
It's not long.
Yeah. Can you put your own slides in it? Right?
Well, you almost have to, I mean,
Yeah.
there's like, Kahoot is already like, there's already
Subject matters and all just, you don't have to actually be looking for it.
Pear Deck, you almost have to create your own.
Right?
And then I teach second grade, so I don't do slides like I did when I was on Zoom. Everything's hands-on and interactive,
Makes sense.
and now I don't really
Okay.
need that.
Any other ones?
I don't think that's an app, right? Is it the Ladybug?
Ladybug, that's like a dot can.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it's called? You know, you-
Yeah, I think
Oh, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
using a lot of, I don't know if it's an app or not, but like the egg puzzles,
Oh yeah, I use that puzzle all the time. I love it.
Ed Puzzle?
egg puzzles.
Ed Puzzle. Oh, I've used that. Yeah,
And
that's
my kids actually like that over like me giving a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
So I usually utilize that for like history, science. There's another quizzes too.
Oh yeah. Quizlet.
Quizzes.
Quizzes.
It's just quiz with another Z.
I-Z-Z.
I-Z-Z. No, I-E-S.
I don't think you spelled it right.
It's okay, we know it.
They're being nice, but I'll just tell you.
Only one Z, is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yes.
Quizzes. No, so after the Z, the first Z, there's I, Z, Z.
Oh.
That's okay.
Is that ever come to the eraser?
Yeah. You need a
Yeah,
eraser and a pen.
Yeah, you
So
need
you
to
know
get your IT person and be like, hey, where's my little box of accessories?
Put
Oh, you have
at
a
work
name?
order.
It has an
Put it
eraser,
at
yeah. Has an eraser, it's like digital. Yeah.
You need to put
They gave you just enough.
To get by.
Yeah.
That would be considered a first year teacher.
Hey, did we give you that book?
No, we had a training when I first started.
Who did it?
Madeira Tech.
The what?
Madeira Tech. Who did the training? I don't remember her name, but she came from like the East Coast.
It was a she?
Yes.
Huh.
Alright, question. Still having classroom management problems with?
What did you say? What was the problem?
Stealing?
Yeah.
From you or from each other?
From
me.
all of it.
I'm
For
stealing.
us, it's all of it.
Yeah.
Like when there's a sub there, they try to be sneaky and like steal like pencils, because since I'm at a dual language school, they switch from like teachers, so one's to English, one's to Spanish, and their English teacher charges them like fake classroom monies if they need pencils. So I had a student like steal pencils from me, so that way he doesn't have to pay.
Oh, my goodness.
But I found out when I charged them per pencil and interest for stealing.
Oh, good. Maybe they'll learn from that. You don't like when you have to pay for stuff.
Nope.
I have the same issue, but with high schoolers, like to steal bathroom passes. Like we have like a little pad of like bathroom passes that we fill out, which are also really annoying. But in my case, I was fed up with it, and I gave them major referrals, and I called security and sent them out. Yeah, because
That's stealing.
yeah, because I was just tired. Yeah.
When they're going to be getting their friends out of class.
Yeah. And now I also bought like a little desk organizer thing, so like they're hidden. Like on my desk, like I moved it too, so it's like more private. Because I'm like the only thing I'm really picky about is like my desk. You know, like,
Right.
everything else like we can share, right? Like this is my personal desk. Like that means you're reaching into my drawer, or like that. The one that happened when they were stealing is because I left them like on the table. I went to go help a student, and I left them here. Goes walking out.
But still, like,
Yeah.
That means you can't trust your class.
Yeah.
which is really a crappy feeling, right?
Yeah.
I never had anything stolen, believe it or not, or at least I didn't know if it was stolen because I was pretty unorganized. But they weren't allowed to be behind my desk, and then I kept it kind of in a weird corner because I didn't have it up front or in back directly. And so I would, if I saw them behind my desk, but of course the whole point was they were trying to get away with stuff. The only person I've ever had steal from me was a janitor. He'd been with the district 25 years, and I had fundraising money that I had stuck in my cabinet thing, my file cabinet, and all of a sudden it was all missing, and I was the junior class sponsor. So that was all there, you know, and granted I should have turned it in, but it was money I had just gotten that day. And so I was like, no big hurry. And then they told me that he'd been stealing out of other classrooms, so then they put a camera up and they caught him. Yeah. And I thought that entire career, you just gave it all up.
For like what?
For $100 bucks?
Yeah, $100.
If that?
Yeah.
So sad.
What else are you struggling with? Good to go? Everything's running smoothly? No?
Oh.
No, I haven't had any really major issues. It's all happened outside. Fights or stuff like that, but not inside.
For high school, cell phones is a big one.
A little bit.
Yeah, you don't look down at your lap and laugh at your cell phone.
Mine are the specials, like, they go out to specials and it feels like they're in a different land.
Mhm.
Like, you guys have your same expectations in my class that you have over there.
But I think
So then
that's
the
where,
specials are like, they did this, this, and this. And I'm
but I think that's where the class management is because they haven't established that. So they know where they can get away with.
Because I'm on
Yeah.
the other side looking in, and
Right.
I have problems with like teachers who are more like, okay, let's line up.
Right.
5-star line. Okay, they're all yours, you know, but they don't set their kids in that like line when they walk over there because they're pretty much like handing them off. They're like, okay, they're your problem now.
Right.
So that's where I have to like come in and be the hard ass, and like, what's going on? So it's like I'm picking up kind of the slack that like that teacher doesn't, like isn't doing. Because if they are doing it, then I don't really have those problems.
yeah, no, and in the classroom, like, one of our teachers is, she was a 6th grade teacher, never have a problem in her class. Like, with Jill, awesome. Like, I never hear a complaint from that classroom. And then other classrooms, I'm like, what do they do now? And it's one kid. But he knows he can't do those things with me.
So the special is saying, I had a problem with Joey
Uh-huh.
and expects you to discipline.
Yes.
You need to set a clear boundary and say, no, that's your problem,
Yeah.
you deal with it. Joey doesn't give me a problem in my class.
Well, I think that's where that expectation is that she hasn't established clear expectations.
Well, that's why you
in
need to
class
set that
management.
boundary.
Right.
This isn't my problem, and I'm not contacting, I'm not dealing with this issue
Yeah.
because
Would you
it's
say?
under your watch.
Would you say like I guess a correct way to go about it would be like, since I'm the art teacher, I teach at elementary school, so I'm with the specialist as art. If I went to the teacher and I was like, hey, this is what the student did, can you take away their recess for this? Like, would you say that's appropriate, or is it just like me as the teacher has to go? Because it's like, it's different. We have like periods that are constantly going, and it doesn't match up with like those kids that we get to be out there for their recess or lunch recesses.
And I think
Oh,
that
so you
makes
can
sense.
even do like a consequence.
Yeah. Like, I had a kid in art, he spent 20 minutes and the rest was the same kid, And he was putting soap on the floor. So the art teacher told me, oh, can we take his lunch? I'm like, yeah, we'll take his lunch and he'll write an apology letter to you. Like, that was perfectly fine. But it's the teachers that are like, well, he did this. And I'm like, well, what's your consequence? Nothing. And then he comes in thinking, I can go back again and do nothing.
I'd be careful about taking PE away or recess, just because then they're that much worse.
Yeah.
Well, because they have that energy buildup.
Yeah.
But the apology letter, I think about it, because he's like, oh, I have to write.
You have a solution for
Yeah.
today.
Well, what I started doing was like to kind of handle it in my classroom is if they're not, because I only see them once a week for 50 minutes. So if they're acting up in my classroom, I started putting out like math worksheets, psych words. I said, okay, you're not going to be for me, and you want to do my project, and you're going to do like this supportive work for you. You don't like it, you don't want to do it, but you're going to do it.
So we have another solution for you today.
Oh.
Yes. Jenny's gonna tell you about New Focus.
It's not as bad as you think, I promise. If you've been doing it, you probably weren't trained completely on it. At least that's been the experience here when they've had time to teach people come before. So I'll be curious to see how much of it's accurate.
I had a student last year, he's in 3rd grade, but my classroom became the refocus classroom for him.
Oh, lovely.
And I'm like, what is it? Okay.
Did you agree to that?
Well, the teacher was like, I just need him out because he got in a fight with another kid, he's a 3rd grader. So he just needs a place to go, and we build a connection. So he just sits there and he helps me for like 10 minutes and he goes. But I'm like, what is he supposed to be focusing on? So I wasn't told what to do with him.
Oh, we got something for you today.
I was just told
Today
to.
will probably
He's
be
really
one of the most
focused.
meaningful for you guys.
We've got something
I
for you.
think you'll like especially the stuff he's gonna cover first. It's good stuff.
So we have a good cop, bad cop thing.
Always that.
Are you the good cop? I am.
Why am I always a bad one?
That's okay, it's you and me. For the balance.
Can we revisit though, a few minutes ago I asked, are you having classroom management problems? And you're like, no. So you see where your sternness has come into play,
Right.
and you're not experiencing these issues?
Because even I've had a sub, like, because I've had a meeting and I'm gone for like maybe an hour, and you know, I set them straight and I tell them, you know, my expectations when I walk out of the classroom is still the same. And sure enough, when I come back, the sub's like, oh, this is like a great 8th grade class because you don't get this, you know, like in a normal.
So you have high behavioral expectations to go with your high academic expectations. And while they may not say it now, 2 years from now, they're going to come back and say you were my favorite teacher. They will. Because they felt safe in your class, they felt cared for in your class, they felt validated in your class. And that's huge. Huge.
Because I've known that I have a pair of twins that are in my classroom, and it seems like they have always had trouble with a teacher. And I've had zero problems from day one. Their NWA scores have actually gone up. So but it's the same thing. I've been stern, but you know, at the same time, like, there's expectations.
We had a teacher testimony the other day that said, well, why are you dressed so nice? Blah, 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 blah. Well, we have this project in our English class, and that's the requirement that we to dress up. And she tried, couldn't get her to do it. And it was just a difference of, this is how we do it. And if you're going to be in this class, this is how we roll. No exceptions. And the kids, once they understand you really care about them, and now you set these expectations, they meet them. So now you're seeing, since day one, we put these high expectations of behavior. Oh, heck no, we don't do that in my class. Right. You might get away with somewhere else, but you don't get away with it here. This is not how we do it. Let's try that again. Now we do the same thing with academics. Oh, no, 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 no. This is not an effort that I accept from you. Your effort needs to be up here. And you're getting it. And that's great.
Obviously not 100% of all my students, but I'm like,
well, we're still working with human
It's
beings.
that 80-20 rule, as long as 80%.
80. Well, I think I'm close to 80. I would say.
That 8th grade school level as a whole is really good. I work at the same school as well.
So, yeah. And so you realize that in day one you had those expectations, right? And now you all know what to do day one next year, right? Are there things you could do, and it's not one of our questions, but are there things you would do differently your first week next year that you did this year? What would you do different next year when you start the year?
I think every year is different. This year will be my 8th year. So every year I think the first day I kind of observe the kids, and that's where I know, like, I set my expectations right away. And then from there, I'm like, oh, this class is going to be really good at this, so I can do this, this, and this with them, or this class is going to need some work on this, so I better be a little bit more stern there. But I always start with really high expectations, and then now they can run the classroom by their own, so I kind of can not be on them, like, no, this is how we're going to do it, this is how it's going to go. Now it's kind of like, okay.
So what you're saying is the procedures and expectations that I laid in the first few weeks of school, even though we weren't able to get to academics, we worked on this, and now it's paying off exponentially.
Yes.
We have much more instructional minutes now because there's transitions of 30 seconds instead of 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm not having to sit and nag a student.
Yeah.
Right, and I think I'm the same way though too. Like, I think we set the expectations, and now we're just like focusing on actually the academic part. You know, just things and short periods and.
So when you say you're setting up expectations, are you talking about next year would be teach twos, where you would say, this is how you run at the classroom?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think giving examples, I think, would solidify what we expect. Instead of letting a situation arise and then trying to backtail. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So my wife will go in and observe a class and working with a troubled preschooler, and they're doing something that she wants them to do, stand in line, hold hands, whatever. She takes a picture. and then she puts it on, laminates it, blows it up and laminates it. And now she has a visual that shows a student who, even language or wherever, autistic, this is what, remember you did this is what it looks like, let's line up. And so she didn't have to give a lot of answers. And you're doing the same thing by saying I have examples. Remember when we played that game back at Easton where I made you do the teach-tos and you had to show me what it looked like and show me what it looked like messed up, and you can still do that, right? What are some other things you would do? What are some changes you're planning on making for August?
I think maybe like, this is gonna sound bad, but not listen to my principal or like vice principal on like some suggestions that they have. Because for me, it's like, for us, it's like walking in a 5-star line all the way to class. And sometimes they're like, well, don't waste all your time on that. You know, do it once or twice and then just go into class. But for me, I'm just like, what works for me is like, no, if you guys aren't doing it correctly, then we're gonna continue to redo it until it's done correctly.
Otherwise, they know they can keep screwing up and
Yeah.
go.
But then the VP comes by or like the principal and they're like, well, like, it's already time, you should have been in your classroom already. And I'm just like, I understand that, but we're not out here just because I want to have it.
Are you tenured?
No.
I was gonna say, tell them to screw up, but.
I would.
Not there
yet. After next year.
Or you just do it and you keep doing it. You don't even have to like, you
But
know.
what you're saying is, if I get it right in August, then in October I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Because this is already an established pattern. And
Yeah.
there was a study done with infants where they made the room look like it didn't have like it dropped off. It was an optical illusion. And then first the babies tried to find their boundaries, and then once they found the boundaries, they stayed in the center of the room. But when they couldn't find the boundary, they got agitated, right? I think that's human nature at any age. What are the expectations? What are the boundaries? We can figure that out. We even do that getting on an airplane. We know what the expectations are. We don't have to be told to put the seatbelt on.
Well, some people apparently.
I mean, think about this. I grew up in a time when we didn't have to wear seatbelts in the car. We had a station wagon. My dad would take us up in the mountains. My brothers had a Dane called Centrifugal Force. And we would get in the very back of the station wagon and allow the weight, of course I'm the biggest one and the oldest one, you're blam, you're squishing second and third child against the side of the car. We thought that was the greatest thing. It's not even a thought anymore, right?
Right.
Hey, can I ride in the back of your pickup? No. Not even on a dirt road. You can't do that anymore. That's part of
On babies, there were no car seats. Back, I mean, and if they were really skimpy. Like,
Mom used to hold you in the front seat, and she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. So, what's your seatbelt? Dad putting his arm out, right?
with their cigarette out of her mouth. And my dad with the windows rolled up.
Right?
Yeah, it was fun.
That's how we got car sick. We found out later is that my parents smoked in the car, and that's what made it sick. They stopped because they got tired of cleaning up the vomit. But the point is, I don't even get in the car anymore without putting a seatbelt on. It's just it's habit. You don't even think about it. And I remember people, oh, this is invasive. You can't tell me what to do, and I'm gonna, and people would hide it, or they would buckle the seatbelt behind them so that the alarm would go off, and eventually just put the seatbelt on. Now it's uncomfortable to ride in the car without a seatbelt. It's the same way with your lines. It's uncomfortable walking all over the place because we always have these, and even when you have a sub, they're going to walk in on. That time is well invested.
That makes sense. There's a 6th grade teacher at our school, and he's not new. And when he's walking his kids, my classroom is in between, so it's a hallway. You're gonna hear him, I told you guys to slow down! Like he's screaming at them from the time he exits the classroom until the time he's in the cafeteria.
He yells and screams at no matter
And they could care less.
all the time.
And we could have fixed that at the very beginning.
Yeah.
In fact, they were already trained.
They've tuned them out now.
Yeah. No, they have.
He has a lot of
They were already trained. All you had to do was take it.
Yeah, he should have been here.
He should have been here.
Going like that, it's more like a comment, and it could be a dumb one, but like could that also mean like how they were saying like they train Red to like tune him out? Could it be like the same thing with like seatbelts in the sense of like, as we go forward in human progress and technology, do we also like condition ourselves in the way of like, because I can imagine your cars when you were growing up, maybe fatalities and accidents weren't as much, or the roads infrastructure wasn't as dangerous as it is now, but now we have cell phones. And so now like, sometimes people still don't wear the seatbelt even though they know like a guy can come 100 miles an hour down the street and kill them, right? Or with like someone yelling and screaming at them all the time, eventually they get conditioned like human psychology and like you tune that out.
Actually, with airbags and seatbelts, fatalities in the United States are around 35,000 per year. But before it was 55 and 60,000.
Oh,
And
well, there wasn't even the whole 55 saved lives back then. It was,
well, that was before Carter even, but, or Nixon. Nixon was the one that brought in the 55. But and they didn't have safety glass either, right? So now, if your windshield breaks, it's just spider webs. But they didn't have safety glass. People were dying just from the glass, or they were impacting the steering wheel and dying, or getting crushed, or kinds of bad things. There's other designs in the car too. Now they have what's called a crumple zone, so that the front end gives and spreads out the energy before it gets to the cab, kind of like NASCAR. Back in the day. So anyway, but the point though is that we can learn these expectations. And this poor 6th grade teacher, he already had that infrastructure built. All he had to do was say, "You remember how to do this in 5th grade? Well, we're going to do it again." But there's another reason that didn't happen. And now his life is miserable.
well, and all the kids are going to know that he's the screamer. And so he's already set that without even realizing it. That, you know, the kids know that he's pushing.
They walk out of his classroom like forever. Like, I'm just going out.
Oh my God.
He's like, come back here. I don't have to listen to you. And I'm like, oh
No,
my
let me tell you a story. Pertaining to this, I have my 8th graders that there are some 3 girls that were going into 6th grade for cheer signups. They walk into his class and they came back like just like mad, even mad to the point where like Mrs. Daniel, they treat him so bad. Like they yell at him, they tell him like to shut up. They tell him to his face like you don't know what you're talking about. Like shut up. Like and then like they came back and they're like, Mrs. Daniel, can you go in there and yell at them? I'm like, I go, what is that gonna do? And they're like, they just need something. They're like, they're mean. They're like awful. They're like, we're just sorry for you when they actually come into 8th grade. I go, no, they're gonna know not to expect that. Our expectations are gonna be the same.
You could tell him he's welcome to come next year. We'll take him.
You should recommend it. Say, I hear you screaming all the time. Talk baby.
Yeah, no, but he'll tell you to his face like he's been a teacher for I don't know how many years, and I'm like, well, probably not a favorite. Right.
But
Like,
if he's interested, we'll take him.
I don't know how they would pitch that.
He will be around this coming year, but not next year. We're gonna make sure that we do the paperwork because apparently the admin weren't up to date on the paperwork.
I mean, somebody
He's not being evaluated this year.
He was supposed to be, but
But they messed up.
Too many.
So he could be SAR, right? Is it SAR?
No, he
R.
can't because he's not being evaluated.
He is being evaluated. It's just they missed a few.
Then he's not being evaluated. That's the way it is.
That's what it is.
If they miss
If
one,
you mess up one, it doesn't count, right? Like they can't, they have to start over.
You either do it or you don't.
for the
That's what I
informal,
started.
So
Informal.
For the formal?
For veterans, it's every other month, right?
Yeah.
Right. For
If you miss those, then you can't.
so
evaluate.
he's actually new to the district.
Then he could be every month.
I get
Right.
2 informals.
He should have been doing.
I get
every
one
month.
every
So did his tenure start over when he went to a new district?
Yes,
I'm already
So he's,
permanent.
could be.
So say they miss one on me, and I get 2 informals every month, but they missed 1 informal on 1 month. Could they still give me formal evaluation or no?
I don't know the answer to that.
So that's my
All I know is I have 4 teachers and I haven't missed any because I'm afraid the heck what happens if I do. So I I got it evaluate all 4 of them.
Is that why one of them came in like twice in one day to make up?
Yeah.
Mine?
Yeah.
They just wanted to torture you.
They left and came back, and left and came back.
But like when she comes in, it's like after the lecture, and then they're on independent study, like independent work. I don't stand around and check to see what they're doing, because my class is trained. Like either pretend you're doing something at this point, or actually work. You know what I mean? I don't.
But you're wandering the room, checking in everybody, right?
What? She comes in after the fact.
They always come in when you're not doing anything.
But you're not sitting behind your desk.
Yes.
You are.
Yes.
I would recommend.
If you with your Spanish speaking kids.
Even if you get up and go sit with kids.
Well, when she comes in, sometimes I, like checking up on my email real quick, and then I monitor when she comes in. Like I don't stay like sitting, but she happens to come in.
I would recommend as much as possible not to ever sit behind your desk. So even if they're working independently, you're walking the room, monitoring what's going on, checking. It's one way you can check for understanding is see what the students are writing and doing. Checking for cell phones.
What about small groups, if you're saying like a small group?
Well, that's different.
That's different.
That's different because you got stations,
Right.
and that's what you're instructing, right? But a red flag for an administrator would be somebody sitting behind their desk. Even if you, and I understand attendance, that only takes a couple of minutes, but if you're correcting papers, or you're doing lesson planning, or you're looking at Facebook or whatever, and you're sitting behind your desk on the computer, and you're there for more than 5 minutes, that's a red flag.
And
Well,
that's
it's never more than a minute when she comes in.
Minutes, yeah. But
Every time
I'd
she
rather
comes
her.
in, I'm like sitting.
I'd rather they catch you standing than sitting. You know what I mean? Plus, we already know about proximity and how well that works. But you don't even have to interfere. You're just checking for understanding. What are they writing? You're checking for their work. And you'll find that you become available by walking the room, and so students will ask quietly for help, where they may not have asked for help if you were sitting behind a computer. Maybe out of respect, or maybe out of embarrassment. But if you're walking by.
No, actually, my kids are really good about either raising their hand or they actually coming in. Because sometimes I'll have a few students, like working, in small groups.
That's fine.
But it's never when they're actually coming in.
I could be talking to the VP, my kids are coming up to me like, Miss, I need help. And I'm like, they had me pushing.
All right, the best lessons, books, and materials in the world won't get students excited about learning and willing to work hard if they're not motivated.
even though I had to quote USC, which is against I'm a Notre Dame fan. But
At least it wasn't Berkeley, so.
True. Or UCLA.
UCLA's going to win the tournament.
You think so?
Yeah.
You want the money?
All right.
Okay.
Actually, there's a few of us that have been together since 2005, and we play pool.
Okay.
And we actually have a football pool, and then we do a basketball pool. But it's kind of interesting. So we put some money in there. But the deal is, when it's done, we go to the vineyard, put all the money in the pot, and pay for our eats.
oh, that's cool.
So we're not really gambling, we're just using it as an excuse to get together. But the person that won doesn't have to pay because there's enough money to cover everything. But by the time you pay the tip and everything else, you walk out with $3. So it's not bad. Anyway, but I am going to bet that UCLA is cool. Even though they're number 2 seed. PAT is preferred activity time. And it's set aside, and it is an educational activity. So preferred activity time sounds like let them go sit in the beanbag chair and look at the comic books, or we're going to show a movie because you're in PAT. That's not it. It's an academic activity that you already have planned that students like to do. So we talked about some of those apps a moment ago. If they like Jeopardy, what was it called? Jeopardy?
Lab.
The Jeopardy Lab. If they like quizzes or Quizlet, or Kahoots, if they like those kind. I've seen kids, they get into it, right?
Yeah.
That's a preferred activity. It could be computer time where they're running through, I don't know if they like Khan, but there's some other math things that you're doing, or reading, or whatever it is. It could be some of the activities that we're going to show you today.
Thank you.
Okay. So just understand that preferred activity is still tied to your standards. It's still an academic activity, but it can be what kids would really find engaging, like it. Can be noisy, right? It could be a competition. Jeopardy's a great one, but there's a lot of noise when you play Jeopardy, right? There's all kinds of different activities that you can do that kids like to do. But the real key to preferred activity is that it takes the responsibility of time management from you and gives it to the students, right? So if you went to Fred Jones, the guy would tell you a story about money management. I can't manage money until I have money to manage. I can't manage money until I have money to manage. He would tell the story of his son gets an allowance, you can do whatever you want with your allowance. And there was a party coming up on Friday night, and says, Dad, can I have 20 bucks I have to buy the potato chips for the party? He said, well, I already gave you your allowance. I know, but I already spent it. Huh, well, what are you going to do? Well, can I borrow money? I give money, I don't loan money. Hard lesson for that student. He had to figure out what to do about buying potato chips for the party, but Dad wasn't going to give him extra money on top of the money you already given him. What lesson did that student learn?
Managing money.
Got to manage his money. Same thing with time. I will tell you that kids are paid to goof off. Kids are paid, that's their professional job, is to goof off. And as we were talking about the 6th grade student, our teacher, the more we allow that to happen, the more they're going to run with it, right? That's their natural inclination. We want to be entertained, and if you're not going to do it, we'll do it for ourselves. So now we're going to talk about how do we get students to manage their time. And I will tell you that what I'm about to share with you, you're going to go, why didn't you tell me this back in August? Well, part of it is that we found over time in giving this seminar is that this is something that gets cherry-picked and used, and then we throw everything else away that we've been talking about, and it works for a while and then dies away. But it works well when it's part of the system of all the things that we've talked about. Okay? So preferred activity provides motivation, fun educational time, and it's going to impact your classroom immediately.
I'll tell you an example. I walked into a classroom that the principal had either told Steve or me that this teacher was totally out of control, like classes were out of control. I think it was at the elementary school. And I walked in and it wasn't as bad as I think it had been painted, but then again, maybe it's because I walked in the door. But it was kind of chaos. Like when she said, let's line up or let's switch stations, they were horrible. And so I told her about PAT and I said, just try it. Try that and try exit tickets. And immediately her class, straightened up, I guess is the correct term. But it was because they wanted the structure. They really do. And she was late first semester, so it wasn't like she had set it up at the beginning. So it works no matter when you put it in.
All right. All right. So you're going to set this up. It doesn't change behavior. The bonus PAT does. So let's do this. So what you're trying to say is we want to set something up in a couple of days where you have a preferred activity. And in your mind, you have an understanding of how many minutes that's going to take, right? So you might have a goal, this activity is going to take 20 minutes. So you might even start with, all right, we have 10 preferred activity minutes. Let's see if we can earn more minutes. You don't tell them that it's going to be 20. You already have that lesson plan for Thursday, but you don't tell them that. But you said, we need to build our PAT. How can students earn more time? So there might be automatic, is one of them, automatic PATs. It could be as soon as the bell rings, they're in their seats and ready to work. All right, that's an automatic minute. We'll give you a minute. If everybody's in their seats before the bell rings, ready to work, here's a minute.
So you'll hear them. Oh, they'll have a lot to say about their friends that aren't busting their butt to sit down.
Mm-hmm. It would be maybe even a hurry up. We would call it a hurry up automatic PAT. It could be a transition. We have 7 minutes to finish this assignment, but if you finish early, I'll give you the extra time for PAT, right? And you're thinking this should only take 5 minutes, right? You're kind of gaming the system so that they're earning these minutes. But all of a sudden, somebody that's goofing around, well, now it's not the teacher nagging them, it's their friends. Hurry up, we want to get our PAT, we want to work on this, help us out. And so they start, they'll start, finish your, get it done. And you also have to say accuracy. You can't just write numbers down on a math assignment. You have to have some accuracy to it. So one way is automatic, if you're sitting in your seats. Another is what we call that bonus, which would be like a transition, or as work. So it takes less time. You give them 4 minutes and they take 3, you take that extra minute and put it up. So you keep a chart of your bonus minutes right on the whiteboard. Well, we're up to 16, and you can have different classes or periods compete with one another. Okay? What are some things you can do where you're trying to save time, or you want students to manage time?
Clean up.
Clean up. You have 5 minutes to clean up, but if you can get it done in 4, I'll put that extra minute on PAT. Good. Clean up. What else?
Not borrowing pencils
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
or stealing them.
Well, you could say, if nobody uses the bathroom today, I'll give you an extra bonus on that amount of PAT. Okay?
That could get you in trouble, though.
Yeah.
So if you need to use the bathroom, it's a bonus minute, right? But you can play with that.
Yeah.
What else? Everybody turns in their homework. I'm sorry.
Transitions.
Transitions. Sure. So you can work on a stopwatch, right? And this should take, especially at the beginning of the year, it's going to take 4 minutes. Let's see if we can get it 3. Now we're in March. This should take 45 seconds. Let's see if we can get it done.
And they love the competition.
That is kind of fun. Can we get it done? What else? Do you still collect homework?
Yeah.
If everybody turns in an exit ticket before the bell rings, right? All those you can work with to adding on these minutes.
Like lining up after lunch. Like sometimes, I don't know how it works at y'all's school, but sometimes they just have to be at their classroom when it's over. But you can tell them exactly how you want them to be.
All right, so now we're adding up these minutes, okay? And encouraging them to work. What if they do something that doesn't make the timeline? We have 4 minutes to get this done, and then they go over. Right? By the way, don't ever allow a substitute to control your PAT. Don't even tell them about it. They'll abuse it. I'm not kidding. This is just for you. All right, so something goes south, and you decide that we need to take time off. We always add in minutes. We always subtract in seconds. Do you see how we're gaming the system? All right, you get 2 bonus minutes if you blah, 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 blah. Oh, we missed our target by 10 seconds. I gotta take that time back. So here we get 10 seconds. I'm gonna put a decimal point. 10 seconds. You see how we're still shooting for that 20 minutes on Thursday? You're gaming the system, but they're getting time to manage. And they will start busting each other to get it done. Now, in a moment, I'm going to show you what kind of activities, some examples, and I'm sure you guys are way more creative than I am. I'll show you a bank, I'll show you some other ideas in a moment. But one other thought is that you can also take this and create a PAT for an individual student that's causing you problems. So you can have a class PAT, and then you have this Charlie, oh, we always call him Larry.
Larry.
So Larry's causing you all kinds of problems. And everyone's getting upset with Larry to the point that Larry's getting ostracized in class because every time he turns around, he's costing the class time. So what we do with that is we no longer hold the class accountable for Larry's behavior. But we give Larry his own PAT. Larry, if you can get to that, you can on Thursday do this. So if he spoils it, he's only spoiling it for himself. But that's where you kind of define it a little bit better. So now we can take care of Larry, and he's not being picked on. But here's the catch: we also say to Larry, if you own bonus points for yourself, you also earn them for the class. Is that a positive? So now the class is encouraging Larry to get on track and do his thing because everybody benefits. But when Larry goes sideways, only Larry suffers that consequence. So they don't punish the whole class. You've got to be careful because if Larry's causing the class to go downhill, Larry's going to get picked on the playground or the bus or wherever else. We don't want to do that. We're actually building a system where Larry can be the hero. And think about this in a profound way. It may be the first time Larry's ever been a hero of a class. Because he's always been the troubled child. We talked about the trauma and the drama. He might be coming from trauma and bringing it into your classroom, and he's never been a hero. And now all of a sudden you can flip the script.
And we've talked about like connecting with some of your more difficult kids. So here's Larry. When you have the conversation about his PAT, that's one of those contacts where you're kind of fighting for him. At least he feels that way.
I've done this for stuff with Kahoot, but I haven't used numbers. Like one time I was out, I did a flower, and they had to earn 10 petals, and that was 10 minutes of Kahoot. One time I did a cookie, and they had to put chocolate chips, 10 chocolate chips.
That's cool.
That's the same concept.
But I've never done the minutes. I've just done the visual for them.
How old are they?
Because that's working. You don't have to. You're using this system.
Yeah.
You're just labeling it differently.
Yeah.
It's perfect. Don't change. Just be right. What?
No, I was just looking.
Yeah. No, I think it's perfect.
Using more of a visual.
Yeah.
What
Did you ever
grade?
take it
Second.
Oh, that's
Did you ever take a
perfect.
petal away or a chocolate chip away?
No, I just put on there like they have to earn it. I don't say to take anything away. So sometimes I'll come and they have 9. I'm like, oh, you guys missed it by 1. If our morning's really good, I'll add another one. I'm like,
So-
okay.
The adjustment would be if your transitions are right. So now it's very specific behavior. If we can get our math assignment done in 45 minutes, and we have leftover time, I'll give you that extra.
Chocolate chip.
Right?
Yeah.
Because now we're putting, because if we're good this morning, it's too
Very general.
ambiguous for kids to focus on, right? And I think you're finding that kids can't focus on some long-term goal. They need really short and very specific, here's what you need to do.
Has it always been, or does it seem like this generation seems more of a, like an instant gratification?
It's always been that.
It's always been? It seems more now with technology and everything.
I gotta
access.
confess, if I'm a second-year-old boy, I don't know what's gonna happen on Friday. I remember we get beads and class money and this and that, but I was so impulsive, I wouldn't even, it didn't even dawn on me that what I'm about to do right now is gonna affect what happens on Friday. And I get to Friday and always disappointed because I was over in this group. What did I do? I don't know. But if you told me, hey, in the next half hour, you can blah, 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 you'll get the pedal, you'll get the sticker, you'll get the whatever. Okay. And that would keep me focused, but I couldn't. And then I hate being sexist, but we operate differently, right? And we see a lot of more impulsive behavior in boys and more aggressive behavior. And we don't think, but I will tell you that juniors don't think that. Juniors and you got juniors, sophomores. If you don't do this by the end of the semester, you're going to get a C. I can't even think. I'm just trying
They've
to
forgotten
think
to
today,
use to sign it.
right? Until it's the last 2 weeks of the semester. Can I make it up? Can I do extra credit? Can I blah, blah, blah? Mom's calling me on the phone, right? Sophomore in high school, and I can't think long term. Now, we hope that by college we can get there. Well, you got a term paper due, and you got a file to do, you got to get ready. But what do college kids do?
Party. They wait until it's across.
And we pull the all-nighter, right? So, it's human nature. It's human nature.
And the thing about the boys, I mean, there are so many studies, because we did a lot of that for Abbott, and like organizational wise, they have their own system. They don't like Abbott, we told them how to organize their binders, and they wanted nothing to do with that. And so instead of punishing them, the deal was, okay, if you have your own system and you can explain it to me, I'm good. And so then it let them do it their way, but they had to be able to justify it. You know, if a kid is bouncing and hyper, you know, let them stand up in the back of the classroom. Like, give them that break, because not just boys, but boys tend to be across the board with that. But you're going to have a few girls like me who can't sit still too. And I think just knowing that if I need to, I can stand up takes a lot of that distraction of what I'm doing to my classmates. But it also takes away the fear that I have that I'm going to get in trouble for being squirrely.
So here's how you would roll it out. You actually would do a PAT, and then tell them we're doing a PAT. So it could be. So I want you to turn to that second page. And there's just four examples, and there's a QR code on the front page that takes you to the bank of PATs developed by the Fred Jones Tools for Teaching. But just take a look at some of those, and then think for yourself for a moment, are you already doing PATs in your classroom? Because I think you are. You just don't call it that.
We have that one too, where you have like one of those beach balls and you write like whatever you're studying, you can write questions and then they bat it around and whoever ends up with it. You could almost do it like musical chairs, and as soon as it stops, whoever's got it has to answer one of the questions. Because it takes the pressure off too, because you have some easy ones on there and some not so easy ones.
There's two in the back too, that somehow when I put the packet together I missed it. So when I was teaching English, I used that on the back one, that baseball game. And I would devise questions, we'd get ready for a test, and I would call them single, double, triple, and home runs. And I'd divide the class up into two, and I didn't even have rewards. You won, yay! What do we get, Mr. Thornton? You get my applause. and out the door, right? And so I had a list of questions, and I would ask the student, do you want a single, double, triple, or home run? And, oh, I'm scared. All right, give me a single. Give me a single. All right. Who were the combatants in the Civil War?
The North and South.
The North and South of the United States. All right.
And the Confederacy?
In the Confederacy versus the Union, the North and the South. All right, that's a single. So he goes, and then it would take 4 singles to walk in to get a run. Okay, and if he answered incorrectly, he would have an out, and then we go to the next person. And we would say, okay, what color were the uniforms of the Confederate Army?
Blue.
Gray.
Gray.
Gray. So that's another thing. No, that's an out, right? Because she said blue, right?
Yeah.
So, and then we would go to the next person until we have to force the run in. You can't. You got a runner on second. I got a double. Let you go. No, that runner goes to third. Okay? And then if the other team were to start getting all excited and they shout out an answer, I would ignore it, and then maybe you would hear it and get it right. But if your team gave you the answer, oh, no, you're out. And we go from there. And we just, with the whiteboard, just keep score and go from there. And
Family Feud can be like that too, and that's fun.
Family Feud, Jeopardy, all these kind of games that you already are doing, and now you have technology that you can do that with, right? And kids love that, the competition that they're having. That's a PAT. Yeah, hey, we just did a PAT. I want to do another one on Friday, okay? But in order to do it, you have to earn the minutes for it. Otherwise, we will, whatever it is you do, continue writing an essay or do our math facts or whatever it is that you normally do, okay? What I'd like you to do is, you don't have to do the bonus minutes yet. I would like you to think about a PAT that you can do in your class and see how it goes and see how excited your students get. And then, if you really like it, take it to the next step. Okay, we're going to do a PAT again next week, but you got to earn it. Let's start with, I'll give you 10 minutes and see if we can get to 20. And go from there. And when you're already doing it in your classroom with the pedals or the chocolate chips or what have you. Make sense? Any questions about that?
I think the next slide is having them brainstorm together some PAT. But you gave them a list, so.
These are some of the ideas, the hurry up bonuses, lesson transitions, right? If students are successful in beating the time allowed, you give them the PAT time for the goal of 2 minutes, so the students earn 4 minutes extra PAT time. So hey, if you can beat this time, we'll give you 2 PAT times, okay? Here's some examples. A reward system that doesn't require a lot of time, planning, or expense. Listen carefully to that first sentence. This should not take you all weekend searching Pinterest to find all the ideas you need to make a PAT. You have a bank, and I bet you already have some in your mind. We'll share it in a moment. It's adaptable, so I like what you were saying. I use pedals and chocolate chips. I can help you develop certain behaviors with students and increases learning time by encouraging students to work quickly and efficiently throughout the day. So if this works, you're gaining, as a teacher, instructional minutes. You're also, as we talked way back at the first session, it's 38 kids in your classroom. What if they're all ganging up on you? That's a lot to manage, right? You got this kid talking as soon as you get this one quiet, they're popping up, this one sitting, and you go home, and remember we talked about all the stress that lived in your shoulders and back and your headache, and you're like, no wonder I'm turning gray. This turns it so that students are picking up positive peer pressure to get back on track. Okay? Any ideas? What are some things, normally we work in table groups, or kind of our conference room is a mess, but what are the things you're doing already that fit in this description of PAT? We talked about Quizlet,
Quizzes.
Jeopardy.
One feedback that one of my students, well, a bunch of my students said that they like Jeopardy. So for our Spanish 2 test, we did Jeopardy, so some similar questions, and obviously 500 points, all that stuff. And a lot of students were like, Ms. Bird, we should do this more often rather than Kahoot. And I'm like, perfect, sounds good. So then, obviously it takes a little bit of time because you have to.
That's how you responded to you should perfect? You should have said, totally.
I'm like, are you sure? I normally ask them like, are you sure? And then you hear like different students, no, I prefer this, no, I prefer that. I'm okay. We'll see what's the next activity for next test or something.
So you have a PAT?
Yeah.
And it is a learning activity, right? They're
Yeah.
engaged in orally responding in Spanish, right?
Yes.
Perfect. What are some other ideas?
I've done like snowball fights.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, we do it for spelling. I write their spelling words in there, and then they throw it at each other. I just tell them no on the face. And then I stop the music, they pick one, they open it, they find a partner, they say the word to the partner, and then the partner has to spell it out for them. And then the partner tells them theirs, and they spell it out. So I use that on Fridays before test. I've also done it with like math. Like if we're doing simple adding and subtracting or word problems, they get to take the whiteboard and work with a partner.
Could you write history questions on it?
They like the throwing part.
Can you identify parts of speech in English? Do you have a color circle or all kinds of crazy things, right? With just the snowballs. That's cheap and easy. You have plenty of paper. What else?
If you're having problems with kids being nice to each other, you can also do the snowball, but they have to, like whoever name is drawn, they have to say something kind. And it can't be just, I like them, or they're cool. Like, you want something a little bit richer than that. I've also done it where you tape a sheet of paper to the back, and then this might not work for the younger kids, but for the high school kids I did it. And they had to walk around and write something kind to each person. So then when they get back, they can't wait till they get back and can read what people wrote on their backs. It's kind of cool. And you see even the hardest kid want to read what was written.
They have that game on the iPhone where I'm a person, right? Or whatever. Heads up, right?
Heads up is
Could
fine.
you do that with historical figures?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right? I'm Abraham Lincoln, and so they say, Emancipation Proclamation, Civil War, First Republican, right? Yeah, you can do that.
The older kids all have phones
You can do
too.
that with vocabulary. But you can do them with 3x5 cards.
True.
What else? What are you guys doing? Do you have reading time? Independent reading time or sustained silent reading or anything like that? Do kids like that?
Flashlight
No.
Friday.
Say that again?
Flashlight Friday.
Flashlight Friday.
Yeah.
What is that?
I got really cheap flashlights off of Amazon. They would turn off the lights and they get to read anywhere in the classroom.
Oh, that's
They're
cool.
Little lights.
They
I
did.
want to be in your
Yeah.
class.
That's a PAT. What else?
When I was C-based, I did something kind of similar. We would do Pajama Friday. It was summer school. They wanted it. It was all the low kids when we came back from COVID. And they said, make it educational, but make it super fun. So I asked admin, she's actually with Minerva now, but I'm like, can I do Pajama Friday every day? And she's all, yeah, do it. So I'm like, okay, so every day was Friday, or every Friday was Pajama Friday. And then we would do read and feed. So they would they'd bring in like their stuffed animals, their blankets, and I'm like, go for it. They'd make like little forts and snacks and sit there and read their favorite books.
That's so cool too.
Then Mondays we would start like readers theater. So we'd have like a new play. We'd get our parts. We'd study like every day. And then it was at River Gold. They had an outside like little amphitheater stage. So then we'd go perform out there like on Fridays as well. So those were like a couple things I did in the C-base that were fun. Independent study, it's like I don't get to do those things now.
Those country schools get to do a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
Because there's not as many kids and the parents are super involved.
Yeah.
So is there a way in independent study to say, if you finish X amount of work?
I was already kind of doing like modifications or something, trying to figure out how to twist that.
Good.
That's why I was thinking like if they do 100% work completion, A/B quality, because a lot of them will try to skim, and then attending their weekly meetings, try to build in some kind of bonuses. Even if it's like drop one assignment or something, they'll love that.
Yeah.
Homework tasks, right?
Yeah.
What else you guys do?
I let my students, if they behave, so I see them 4 times throughout the month. So if they get at least 3, the last time I see them that month, I let them choose the medium that they want to use. So if they want to do like watercolors or something, and I'll kind of create a lesson around that there.
So it's a little harder when you only see them 4 times a month, right?
With the high school kids, usually with our poetry unit, but I was an English teacher, but we would do, I don't remember what I called it, I think it was cafe read, and I brought in Starbucks, and then we turned the lights, well, I had little lights, you know, and so it was warm and cozy, and then they would volunteer to read their poems, which of course is scary, right, for most of these kids. But they all did it, and they thought it was so cool because of the coffee, I'm sure. I'm sure their teachers greatly appreciated it, but I didn't care once they left my class. Oh, this is me.
So you have a choice of the clicker, or if you want to swipe. Yeah.
You swipe left. I'll probably forget and just use the clicker.
I like to put it.
So low emergent behaviors. You take my comma away?
I do not.
I must have done it.
That's where I didn't do anything to you.
Okay. Whatever.
I did not edit it.
What do you call it? You sabotage the English teacher, so it looks I don't know how to do my English. Oh no, there it is. Low-level emergent behaviors are those behaviors that can disrupt the classroom. You guys think of some? Talking, tapping your pencil or pen, right? Throwing stuff, that's one I see all the time now in classrooms. They're throwing something at one another. So those are low level. I know they're frustrating, right? And they grate on us. They eventually build up. But instead of sending the student out, because you need to value what you're teaching. If we send them out, they're out of our classroom. We no longer have any influence on them. Plus, when you send them out, you're giving the admin all the power. And the kids know this, so they can push you until you send them out. And my experience, no naming schools, but my experience is they go up to the front and they end up getting candy or playing video games. Or, I mean, there was a kid at one school who was an absolute nightmare. He strangled 2 kids and he was still there. He was still there. And every time the teacher had problems with him, which of course was beyond her ability, right? You shouldn't have to tell a kid not to choke another one. They would send him to the office, the principal would let him play video games, and when he came back to class, he had candy in his hands. And defeat the whole, right? It didn't matter what the teacher did at this point. So I would say that this kid was a different story, but I wouldn't send him out if you can avoid it. Obviously, there's going to be circumstances where we have to, and we'll talk about that. And if you can, deal with the low-level behaviors in your classroom. And we're going to talk about what those constitute and what we're referring to in dealing with them. So the first thing, you have this kid that's sitting there doing this, which is something I would do, right? The tap, tap, tap. I'm not trying to be disruptive. I'm just hyper, and I need to be moving all the time. Or shaking my knee, but not realizing that I'm shaking the whole row. Like, that's my favorite thing. So I notice it, I'm talking, I'm teaching, whatever, and I have to ask myself these 3 questions, okay? They're called the CIQs, or classroom integrity questions. Can you teach while the student is behaving that way? Can other students continue to learn while the student is behaving this way? And then can the student continue to learn while he or she is behaving this way? So, can the other students learn? Can the student himself or herself learn? And then can you teach? So, would this bother you? Depending on how loud it is. Okay, some people would say yes and some say no. Okay, it obviously depends on you as a teacher and what drives you crazy. But could my students continue to learn? Depends on the level, right? If it's a pencil and it's kind of quiet, and then can a student continue to learn? So this student is not trying to be disruptive. They're just, that's their way, right? So 3 is a yes. And then depending on you as a teacher, number 1 could be a yes or a no, depending on you. And then can the other students learn? A lot of times that number 2 depends on your response also, right? If it's a big distraction and you get mad at this kid, you're like, geez, you do this all the time. Yeah, your kids are gonna lose track. So what you do is you ask yourself these 3 questions. Right now they might be new to you, okay? But the more you think about them and the more you kind of say them to yourself, it's gonna be instantaneous. And this one's a touchy one. So you've got this kid who's misbehaving, low level. Is your classroom set up so that this student can thrive? Like, are they, I'm not saying it's ever our fault, but is our classroom set up to help this student be successful? And are we contributing? I know one time I was in a really bad space. I taught like my second 5 years really, really sick. So I was lucky to be there, and I was very not very energetic or anything. And so I had this one kid, and she said something that I took as challenging me, and so I got angry. And I was like, I don't know why you're doing this. And so we ended up having this conversation later that was not necessarily the best. And it was all because of my mood. She didn't do anything. But I was grumpy to her. And most kids are gonna react. And it's not usually gonna be, oh, Miss Taylor, I'm so sorry you don't feel well. They're not gonna say that. All they're gonna see is that you come at them, right? So, am I contributing? Is your room learner friendly? We talked about the zones, arrangement, interior loop. And I don't think did we talk about 2 seats away? It's kind of with the interior loop, but ideally you don't want to be more than 2 seats away when you're walking around to a kid, because if something happens, you need to be able to get over there. And the interior loop kind of helps with that anyway, if you set it up right. And have you covered behavior in a teach tube? Like sorry, I'm spitting. This kid's doing this. Have we talked about this? Have we talked about not being disruptive, right? When I'm talking or one of your classmates is talking. Have we talked about that? If we have, let's talk about how that was supposed to happen. So all of that has to be covered in a teach tube before you can discipline them. So think about that. If you get pulled over by a police officer and he says, well, I'm giving you a ticket, and you say, what for? And he goes, just because, right? You're like, no, that's not gonna work. But for a kid, they don't know that they can go up the chain of command and make a complaint. They don't know that, like what you can do with a police officer, supposedly. If you get a ticket for something you don't agree with, you know as an adult you could take it up. But kids aren't gonna do that. They're gonna take it as they were done wrong, right? So you've got to let them know what their boundaries are and what you're expecting from them specifically. How do you want them sitting in their seat? Because there's gonna be the kid that rocks back. There's gonna be the kid that rocks back and starts peeling the wall. There's gonna be all kinds of stuff. So what do you make it clear exactly what you expect them to do? And as the year goes on, you're gonna notice more and more things that you want to do choose for, and that's fine too. And have you put time into this student to build rapport? Some kids, out of the blue, as you figured out, will be disruptive, angry, mean, and it can be completely abnormal for that student. But they have bad days too. And so understanding that if you have a relationship with one of those kids and you're able to say, hey, come here for a minute, are you okay? That rapport is going to take you pretty far with that. At least they know you're on their side for that day. there's a couple, I don't know if we talked about this, so I put it back in. But if you have a kid who says, like, we always had to read Romeo and Juliet, and I thought about the other day, I bet that's going to be banned because they have a couple and then they commit suicide. So diffusers, that may be, maybe so. There's a couple others, I couldn't think of them. But make sure who you're saying that to, because one teacher had a board member's kid in their class, and the kid said, well, I'm just stupid, I don't get it. And they said, well, that may be so. And then realized what she was saying because she was so, she thought of all these but didn't think about how she was going to say it. So with Romeo and Juliet, I'd say we're going to read Romeo and Juliet, and they'll go, oh, that's gay. And I'd always try to think, well, you know, some teacher could lose their stuff over that and then write this kid up or whatever, but they're just saying it because their friends say it around them and all that. Not that it shouldn't be addressed. I mean, it should. But it could say, Romeo and Juliet is so gay, and that's where you can go, maybe so, but we're going to be reading it anyway. And you kind of disarm the child a little bit. If they're in a bad mood and that wasn't enough, then they're going to come back at you with something else. Directives, instead of like, you don't ask, first of all, you don't ask. If you're screwing around with your friend right here and I go like this, like, pretty clear what I want him to do. If this group over here is chatting too much, if I have my classroom set up the way it should be, I should be able to just go, you know, or even just the look, right? Yeah, and when you get really good at that.
There's a famous diffuser by Winston Churchill. And one of the ladies of the parliament got upset with him and said, Churchill, you're drunk. He said, that may be so, but you're ugly, and I'll be sober in the morning.
Wasn't known for his tact.
Don't use that one.
Yeah, no. Work on the next 3 and I'll come back to you. So you've got this kid that just can't stay focused for more than, and you can walk over and look at their stuff and go, hey, how about this? How about you do 3? And I'll swing back by here and look where you're at. And I guess I shouldn't have said how about. I should have just said work on the next 3. But don't ask. And that was a hard thing for me because I've always asked my students, you know, hey, can we stop now? Can we, you know, be calm? So if I were back in the classroom, that would be something I'd probably have a really hard time with. But I can see why it works because you're not asking them to be good. You're not begging them to be good. You're expecting it. These you already know, the Queen Victoria turn, proximity, gestures. So you've gone through this. You've done the 3 CIQ questions. You've done diffusers. You've done anything that low level that you could do. And the kid has just pushed you. Pushed you. So you go to refocus. Okay, elements underlying refocusing, they're supposed to eliminate you saying the same thing over and over and over. Like I realized when I went home that I either heard my name 500 times or I called a student's name 500 times. And that wears, like you feel it on your shoulders, you feel it, you know, it's stressful. So this ideally will eliminate that. You contingently withdraw attention when problem behavior occurs. So he's acting a fool right now. And I'm like, I've tried everything. Like, I think you need to go to refocus. Doesn't have to be loud, everybody doesn't have to hear it. You could even just walk up next to him and say it. And then they get up quietly, ideally, and go to your refocus area. The other thing is you can walk by him and say that to him and still be talking to your class. You don't have to break what you're doing, you don't have to stop. By doing that, you refuse to let it escalate, and developing that kind of self-control when they're trying to push you up is difficult. The process, early intervention, when you're dealing with the low emergent, you'll send them to refocus, they'll fill a form out, and the student patiently waits. They're not supposed to sit there and go, you know, Miss Taylor, Miss Taylor, Miss Taylor, Miss Taylor. And then, or hold their little thing on their paper and wave it around, whatever. And then you dismiss from refocus. When you have a chance, not right away, but like when you're done, and let's say the kids are doing a practice question, you could walk over and look at the paper, and if it's done to your liking, then the student can get up. Hey, can you do this for a second?
Do the thing.
Do the talking
Oh.
for just a second?
So after exhausting you two, this is the idea, is that you've got all these things you're going to do before you send them to refocus. And then if you have enough, all right, you need to go to refocus. Students are told to go over there. You practice this, they walk over there quietly, they're not throwing a fit, they're not having a tantrum. And then they're going to fill out a refocus form, which we have some samples for you. So go ahead and look at those. They wait for you. You don't wait for them. They're not going to raise their hand. You're going to tell them, I'll come see you. And then you're going to read the form, and if you're satisfied with it, then you can send it back. If you're not satisfied with it, you have them redo it. And in some ways, this is a piece of the restorative justice. Okay? Some of your sites are already doing this. Anyone? You're already doing this at MadTech. How's it working out there?
It works for most. It seems to be a little bit more issue when it comes to the kids that are typically the type of kids that would get in trouble anyways.
So it gives a kid that doesn't want to get in trouble a chance to get out of trouble.
Yeah. For the ones that can't seem to get it, at least for this semester, a few weeks into the semester, they got it. Now there's, and I saw it in here, there's like a chart. You get a certain amount of focuses a day, you get detention the next day, or you get your break taken away. If you get certain focuses a week, same thing, or if it's a certain amount within the week, parent home. So there's escalations, and that's was implemented because of the ones that can't really seem to get it. But even then, from what I've noticed and from what I've experienced, even then, some kids just don't care. And even then, you can tell just by the way they fill out their focus form and by the tons of like intervention that's been put in place with some of them that they don't care and they won't care. And at least from what I observe in my experience, a lot of it is because of home, not necessarily because of what we're doing. So we're trying to have that structure for them, but sometimes, no matter what, they still need that structure outside of class.
So you send a student to the principal's office. Now all of a sudden, you have a list of interventions that you've tried before getting them. All right, a thought approximation. I tried a look. I tried a nonverbal cue. I tried a diffuser. And those things didn't seem to affect the student behavior, so we put them in focus. That actually escalated behavior instead of calmed it down. So I don't know what else I can do anymore but send it to you. And or it's time to call mom and dad, and the same issue. Mom and dad, these are the things that I tried to do before referring your student out of my classroom. And so now we have this situation. You also have a copy of the refocus form that you can give to admin. Say, I tried to get them to do this, and this is what they gave me instead. Better even still is to give to mom and dad who are blaming the teacher for student behavior. Right? Well, I did these things to try to get your student back on track. This is what they wrote on a refocus form.
You want me, if they don't care, I'll do it from here. But I don't have to click.
She wants the control.
I do want the control. So with it, that's ideally the deal is. Ideally the deal that was redundant. But if you've done this, if you've done all the low emergent,
I don't think you're
and then you have you do all the low emergent, and then you make sure that you've documented, but the idea is you're not supposed to document while you're teaching. Because, you know, I know with like referrals, one of the things we always complained about was we had to stop what we were doing to sit down, fill out a referral form, and then wait for that to be dealt with. Meanwhile, you have this kid, depending on what they've done, is standing there waiting for this security to come pick them up, and you're just like, you know, this is defeating the whole purpose. So ideally, the kid fills out the focus form, you take a glance at it, and we'll talk about what they should be saying. And if it's okay, you send them back to their seat. If it's not okay, then you have them redo it. You don't let them leave just because they don't want to be there. Yeah.
Maybe this is what you meant earlier by people not doing this training the right way, because when we were told how to do the refocus it's just a chance for them to reflect, and you need to allow them to reflect however they, obviously you have like the prompt questions. However, we were told that if you guys are going to implement this, these kids will sit there and just write, I don't know, I don't know what I was doing, I was laughing, I wanted to eat, I wanted to whatever. They will not, they won't do it correctly. If the way I would want it, obviously, it's like, you're going to write a complete sentence,
Yep.
you're going to write what you did, and you're going to write what you were supposed to be, exactly how it's supposed to be. During the training, it was, even if they don't do it correctly, you allow them to go back to their seat, give them a chance to return to the class gracefully, and then if they choose to continue the behavior, you refocus them again.
So you can refocus them, but why, my argument for whoever that was, why in the world would we use that then if we're just going to say, oh, you wrote this is stupid, great, go back to your seat. Like, that defeats the purpose, and there's no accountability. Well, that's why I was asking you who did it.
Yeah.
Because there's another guy that does it around here, and he's decent, but, and I'm not saying I have all the answers, but Steve and I sat down and we kind of worked out the parts we liked about Time to Teach and the stuff we liked about Fred Jones. So I may have tweaked it a little bit, but some of these are from that book. And it's frustrating because if you don't have a good understanding of it, you're just like, oh, one more thing. It's just one more thing. But it shouldn't be. But basically, you have this, I mean, next year it will be, because you'll have to set up an area. But dealing with this, it kind of takes your time back. So I send the child to refocus, and they fill out the form. And maybe really crappy. So I walk by when I have a chance, and I look at the form and I go, this isn't quite right. This is where I need you to fix it. You hand it back. Now, mind you, you don't get up and leave the student unless you're done and you've got a quiet minute in your class. Then after class is over, or whenever you have a chance, your lunch or whatever, while you're eating, maybe just take some notes on the back of the refocus form. You know, this is what I've done, this is what I've tried, this is what I'm going to call the parent, you know, all of that. If they don't work on this, then most of your schools have a step policy or discipline policy. At that point, I'd start hitting that. Like, you know, you could say the initial, like usually it says initial warning and then it says phone call home. So you've already done the initial warning, now you're going straight to step 2. But you've got all this documentation, so if an admin ignores this at that point, then they're not implementing their part. And that's where Steve and I need to be involved. So here you got this refocus form. If you look at some of these, this one right here, I think, I'm not sure where this one came from. I probably took it from somebody's. But this is talking about what you had said about the form. It says, today I broke one of the following rules. What I did. Well, you just asked me that. In the section above, it said, I broke one of the following rules. So we're asking the kid again, what did I do? What did, you know, what he did. And then it says, I can make a better choice. That's not a bad comment right there. And then that was it. I think that's probably for a lower grade. And then the next one you have Oak Creek, OCI, up in the mountains. And they did this, what was my behavior? what was I trying to do? What problems did my behavior cause for me, my classmates, and my teacher, or my teacher? And the quote that goes best, and then they refer this quote section, and I can show you that because one of mine did that too. MLK uses the one over here. I kind of like what they did. This was when, oh, who was it that was there? Tabitha, Sabrina?
Rodriguez?
Yeah, back when she was at MLK. Oh, no, yeah. So she set this up, and she's got, you know, what should I have been doing? Why was I sent there? How did my behavior affect my teacher, blah, blah, blah. And then it's got this whole thing in the middle about, you know, why were they unable to refocus? And then at the bottom, it's the referral. So they implemented the referrals and the refocus form. I think that's not such a bad idea if administration's willing to do that. Are any of you, do you guys already, you're the only one that was implementing this?
Well, the whole school
No,
does
but
it.
your whole school?
Yeah.
Is anybody else?
I remember focus classroom for a student.
Yeah, well,
But he
yeah.
doesn't do this.
Okay.
Now you know what you can use.
I know.
So,
And there's a one in there for students that can't write.
yeah, there is.
Did you see
We'll
it?
get to that. So this one that has the Madeira logo, which I think I wasn't supposed to use, but I did. I made this one because I felt like as an English teacher and probably the same as many of you, is if I'm going to have a kid sitting down because they were doing something incorrect in my English classroom, then you're going to write in full sentences, and I want you to put some thought into it. I don't want, if this kid's a frequent flyer, they're going to have those answers down pat. They're going to know exactly what to say. So in this one, it has, you know, what was I trying to do, what problems, and then the quote that best relates to this incident. And then if you look on the back of the 2 papers over, I picked some quotes of people that they probably would know. And so if a kid was being rude and calling somebody something obscene or whatever, Lil Kim, I didn't say it right, Little Kim, she says, I respect everybody, but at the same time, I carry myself with an aura that demands respect too. They could reflect on what they did and why this quote pertains. Doesn't need to be a deep, you know, essay. They just need to make a comment about that. And so that is what I felt was a little more insightful. I feel like if we're going to ask them to be introspective, we kind of need to coach that because they don't exactly know. It's kind of like what he was saying about, you know, they're supposed to go and reflect. Well, how many kids are going to sit down and reflect? They don't know what that means. So they have to be guided a little bit. And then at the bottom it says, I'm ready to return to class. And some of them will say no. Okay, stay there then. You know, I'll give you some more time to think about it. And then here, this right here has the checklist. I think if nothing else, if you don't like my form, this isn't a bad one to have around. Because it's, you know, did you use all these things? Did I refocus twice? I know some people, you can refocus a kid more than once in a class period. But if it's the same thing, it's a little difficult, right? So let's say I get him for running around